You're about to hear how a 27-year-old with a Stanford MBA and a standing desk managed to kill a $120 million deal in his first week on the job because he was embarrassed by my handwriting. My name is Roy Hutchins. I'm 54 years old, and for 23 years I was the VP of Agricultural Lending at First Cornerstone Bank in Lincoln, Nebraska. That doesn't sound glamorous, I know, but let me explain what that actually means. When a farming family that's been working the same land for 4 generations needs to restructure its debt so the grandchildren can inherit a future instead of a burden, they called me, not the bank, me, personally. That distinction will matter before this story is over. First Cornerstone wasn't one of those glass tower operations with a rooftop terrace for client events. It was a 40-year-old community bank, brick exterior, slightly creaky floors, a parking lot that flooded every spring. Not impressive to look at, but it was real. The kind of real that farming families in Lancaster County trusted with their legacies, because it had earned that trust one relationship at a time. I came up through this bank when I was 31, after a failed stretch in commodity futures trading that I'd rather not dwell on. My manager at the time, a man named Gil Hadley, God rest him, handed me a stack of files on my first day and said something I've never forgotten. Roy, the numbers are the easy part. Go learn what the numbers don't say. He sent me out to visit clients on their farms, not to sell anything, just to listen. That became my method. I bought a leather field journal, the kind with a strap that wraps around it, heavy cover, cream-colored pages that hold ink the way good paper is supposed to. And I kept notes from every farm visit, not just the financials, the stuff that mattered. That the Hendersons over in Crete had an equipment barn they'd been slowly restoring for 15 years because their grandfather had built it with his own hands. That the Kessler family wanted their parcels kept together, always, because of a deathbed promise made in 1987. That August Holden, when he shook your hand at the edge of his cornfield, was making a commitment more binding than any document his lawyers would ever draft. I had 12 of those journals by the time this story happened. They lived on a shelf behind my desk, brown, worn smooth at the corners, packed with 23 years of things that don't fit into a database. The biggest deal of my career was in motion on a Tuesday morning in October. The Holden family farms refinancing. $120 million. 5th generation operation. August Holden's great-great-grandfather had bought the first parcel in 1901. 400 acres of southeast Nebraska clay that everyone said was too dense to grow anything worth selling. He proved them wrong. 8,400 acres now. Corn and soybeans, some of the most respected agricultural land in the state. August was 70 years old. His son had passed 5 years earlier, and it was his grandchildren. 3 of them, all in their 30s, who were going to carry the operation forward. But the debt structure was a problem. Legacy loans spread across 3 different institutions, variable rates, mismatched terms. August wanted to consolidate everything, lock in fixed rates, and hand those kids a clean balance sheet before he stepped back from the land his family had spent a century building. I'd been working this deal for 14 months. Not 14 months of spreadsheets. Those came together fast enough. 14 months of Tuesday morning phone calls, of driving out to Crete during harvest, just to be present, to watch, to understand, of recognizing that this refinancing wasn't a transaction for August Holden. It was the last major act of stewardship before he let go. The deal had one unusual feature, right there in the term sheet in plain black ink, Relationship Manager Designation Clause. August had insisted on it after a bank he'd used for years moved his accounts between 3 different officers in 18 months and forced him to start over explaining his entire operation each time. This time, he put it in writing. The account was to be managed by Roy Hutchins specifically. Any change to that designation required his written consent before it could take effect. I thought of that clause as a formality, a vote of confidence, nothing more. I hadn't anticipated Nova Trust Financial. Nova Trust was a fintech outfit out of Austin, not a bank in any traditional sense, a tech company that had acquired a banking charter and was now purchasing regional institutions and converting them into digital-first financial platforms. They bought First Cornerstone in August. The family that had owned it for 4 decades took a good number and retired to Arizona. I understood it, didn't have to like it. The first months were manageable. New branding, new software, a parade of meetings about customer journey optimization. I sat through them and went back to my work. What I didn't know was that someone in Austin was planning a visit. Beckett Morrison arrived on a Monday in October. 27 years old, son of Nova Trust CEO, Stanford undergraduate, Stanford MBA. He'd been given the title of Chief Digital Officer, a role that hadn't existed at First Cornerstone the week before he stepped off the plane. He wore gray running shoes with a sport coat. He had that particular brand of self-assurance that comes from spending your entire life being told you were exceptional, which is different in important ways from actually being exceptional. I noticed him moving through the bullpen that morning, looking at things with the expression of someone appraising property they've already decided to renovate. Our paths crossed that afternoon. I was at my desk reviewing the Holden term sheet, both journals open, my reading glasses halfway down my nose, when I heard footsteps stop behind me. What are those? I turned. He was staring at the journals, with a look you might give to something you found under a sink. Field notes, I said. 23 years of client visits. Handwritten. That's generally how notes work. He picked up the open journal without asking, flipped through it like it was a catalog. I set down my pen. Those are private client records. They're illegible, he said. He put it down. And they need to be in the system. We're migrating all client data to the NovaTrust platform by end of quarter. Contact information, relationship notes, account history, all of it gets standardized and centralized. This, he gestured at my shelf, is a liability. Some of what's in those journals isn't data, I said. It's context. There's a difference. He looked at me with the patience of someone who's been told they need to communicate more clearly with people who can't keep up. Everything is data. Context is just unstructured data. Our platform is built to handle it. I kept my voice level. The Holden account has a relationship manager designation clause. August Holden doesn't trust institutions. He trusts people. There are 14 months of relationship work in those journals that you can't export to a cloud server. Beckett crossed his arms. I understand you've had a long run here. I respect that. But what you're describing is a process problem, and the solution is better documentation practices going forward. What you cannot do is continue keeping proprietary client information in personal notebooks that exist outside our institutional system. That's a compliance exposure, and it's exactly the kind of data siloing we were brought in to fix. Here's the thing. He wasn't entirely wrong about the principle. There's a reasonable argument for centralized records, for institutional knowledge that doesn't walk out the door when an employee does. I've thought about it since, and I'll give him that much. Where he was wrong, catastrophically, expensively wrong, was in his reading of the moment. You don't fix a data siloing problem 2 weeks before the close of the largest deal your institution has signed in 3 years. You don't pull the structural support out from under a building while there are still people working inside it. Beckett, I said, I have a closing with August Holden in 16 days. $120 million. Let me get through closing. Then we talk about how to improve documentation practices. No, flat, final. The voice of someone who needs the room to know who's in charge. We're not building exceptions for legacy employees. Transfer everything to the platform by end of week or we'll find someone who will. The bullpen had gone still. That spreading quiet that moves through an open office when people sense that something real and irreversible is happening. No one was typing. A few people had set their coffee cups down. I stood up slowly. I've never been the type to raise my voice. I've found, over time, that standing up slowly, when someone is trying to diminish you, changes the geometry of the room more effectively than anything you could say. I'm not transferring the Holden notes, I said. Not this week. Something shifted in his face. The patience gave way to something more impulsive. That's insubordination. Call it what you want. I'm calling it terminated. He raised his voice enough to carry. Clean out your desk. Security will escort you out. 23 years, that fast. I want to tell you the floor dropped out from under me. Honestly, it didn't. What I felt was a particular kind of stillness. The stillness that comes when you understand clearly exactly what a person has just done and they have no idea what they've triggered. It's not a pleasant feeling. It's not quite satisfaction. It's closer to watching someone pick up a grenade and carry it toward their own side of the field. I closed both journals, stacked them neatly, opened my bottom drawer and began packing the things that belonged to me. Gwen appeared in my doorway. 12 years at First Cornerstone. The sharpest institutional memory in the building, the kind of assistant who knows where everything is before you know you need it. She looked like she'd seen something she couldn't unsee. Roy, she whispered, tell me you're going to fight this. Nothing to fight, I said. I wrapped my coffee mug in a piece of scratch paper and set it in the box. I'm sure Mr. Morrison has the Holden account well in hand. He's got excellent software. Norm from building security walked me out. 9 years we'd worked in the same building, exchanged the same small talk at the elevator every morning. He stared at the ground the whole way to my car. I thanked him anyway. He muttered something I couldn't quite make out. I drove downtown and sat at the bar at the Cornhusker Hotel. Ordered a bourbon. Let the ice melt for a few minutes. Watched the October light shift across the windows. Let 23 years of something real set on my shoulders. Acknowledge the weight of it and then set it down. Then I picked up my personal phone and dialed a number I'd had memorized for 12 years. Not the Holden Farms main line. Not the office. The number August had written on the back of his business card at a Farm Bureau dinner in 2012, pressing it into my hand and saying, "For when something actually matters, Roy, don't abuse it." He picked up on the second ring. "Holden." "August. It's Roy." Half a beat of warmth, then he heard something in my voice. "What's happened?" "I was terminated this afternoon." Silence. I counted 5 seconds before he spoke. "By whom?" "The new owner's son. 27 years old. Disagreement about how I keep client records." "And who is Nova Trust planning to put on our account?" "I imagine whoever's available and comfortable with their platform." When a man like August Holden goes quiet in a particular way, it isn't confusion, it's containment. "Roy, are you free for breakfast tomorrow?" "I'm unemployed, August. I'm free for the rest of the month if need be." 7 in the morning, the Capital Club. "And Roy, don't sign a single thing with those people before we talk. Not a severance agreement, not a non-disclosure, not an acknowledgement of termination. Nothing." I almost asked why, but I knew why. "Wouldn't dream of it," I said. I ordered a second bourbon. It went down considerably easier than the first. The Capital Club has been in the same building on K Street since 1962. Dark walnut paneling, brass fixtures, carpeting that absorbs sound the way good wool does. The kind of place where Nebraska's agricultural community has been doing its serious talking for 60 years. Not flashy, solid. August was already at the table when I arrived. Charcoal suit over a button-down, boots that had been resoled enough times to double their age. He stood to shake my hand, and the handshake was the message before any words were exchanged. "Tell me everything," he said. I walked him through all of it. Beckett's arrival, the confrontation, over the journals, the firing in front of a bullpen, full of people who were still pretending to look at their screens. August listened without interrupting, occasionally turning his coffee cup in his hands. When I finished, he reached into his coat pocket and produced a folded document, set it on the table between us. I recognized the header immediately, the Holden refinancing term sheet. "Page 11, he said. "Relationship manager designation." He nodded. "My attorney put it there after what happened with Midwest Commercial a few years back. 3 officers in 2 years. Each time, I'm sitting across from someone new who doesn't know us, explaining the same things from the beginning, watching them take notes that disappear when they move to the next account." He tapped the paper. "This time I required a specific name. The account belongs to you, Roy. Not to First Cornerstone, not to Nova Trust, not to anyone's platform. If that changes without my written consent, the agreement is voidable at my option, effective immediately." "They don't know it's there," I said. "No. Because the young man who called my office manager yesterday told her you were on personal leave, and that he was fully briefed on our arrangement." August looked at me steadily. He's either lying or he hasn't read the contract. Both of those concern me equally. I was quiet for a moment. $120 million sitting on a clause that a 27-year-old hadn't thought to look for because he assumed the deal was already his. "August, I want you to know this transaction doesn't need to fall apart on my account. I know what the transaction is worth," he said evenly. "I also know what my word is worth, and what I require from the people I trust with my family's future." He reached into his briefcase and produced a second document, slid it across the table. It was a letter of intent from Heartland Federal Credit Union, Lincoln's largest agricultural lending cooperative. Senior VP of Agricultural Finance, salary that I will only describe as substantially better than what I had been making. Signing bonus. First assignment listed at the bottom of page 1, the Holden Family Farms refinancing, to close on the original timeline. "They've been asking me to move this account for 3 years, August said. "I stayed at Cornerstone because of you. You're not at Cornerstone anymore." He set his coffee cup down. "So." I read it twice, then I looked up at him. "I accept." He raised his cup to old-fashioned justice. We spent another hour on logistics. By the time I walked out of the Capital Club into an October morning that felt sharper and colder than the one before it, The deal had a new home, a new institution, and terms that were, because Heartland had wanted this account for a long time, a quarter point more favorable than anything Nova Trust had offered. All that remained was letting the other side find out. I arrived at the First Cornerstone building the following morning at 9:45. My best suit, the charcoal one I'd bought for my daughter's wedding 6 years ago. My new Heartland Federal business card in my breast pocket. I stood in the lobby next to the marble column near the main entrance, visible, unhidden, waiting. Norm spotted me first. His eyes went wide, then settled. He gave me the smallest possible nod and looked carefully at the wall. Beckett came off the elevator at 9:58, moving fast, hair not quite in order, with the look of someone who had been awake since 5 solving problems that hadn't entirely cooperated. He saw me the moment the doors opened, and he crossed the lobby in a straight line. "What are you doing here?" "Waiting for a client meeting." "You don't have clients here anymore." "You're right," I said. "I don't work here. I work for Heartland Federal. I'm here to accompany one of their clients." The color left his face with such speed that Claudette, the branch manager, reached out slightly, as if she might need to catch him. "What client?" Beckett said. The revolving door turned. August Holden walked into the lobby of First Cornerstone Bank at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, wearing a charcoal suit and moving with the unhurried calm of a man who has never once in his life needed anyone to believe he was in a hurry. He looked around the lobby, me by the column, Beckett in his running shoes, Claudette holding very still, and walked directly to me. "Roy," he said, and we shook hands. "August." I nodded toward Beckett. "I believe this gentleman wanted to speak with you." August turned. He looked at Beckett the way you look at a piece of equipment you're deciding whether to repair or replace. Beckett stepped forward. "Mr. Holden, I'm Beckett Morrison, Chief Digital Officer. I'm really glad you came in. I wanted to personally walk you through our technology platform and how we plan to support the refinancing going forward." "My office manager tells me you called her yesterday," August said, "and told her Roy was on personal leave. There was a staffing transition, and I wanted to reassure your team that the deal." "Was he on personal leave?" The lobby held its breath. "No," August said. "He was terminated, by you, on Monday." He said it with the calm specificity of someone testifying to what they witnessed. "So you looked my staff in the eye and told them something that wasn't true." There was some miscommunication about how to characterize. I don't characterize it differently than I just did. August reached into his coat and produced an envelope. Set it on the reception desk with the deliberate placement of a man who has made a decision and has no intention of revisiting it. "That's my written notice of termination under the Relationship Manager Designation Clause. Page 11 of the term sheet. My attorneys are sending a companion notice to your legal department as we speak." He buttoned his coat. "Roy's with Heartland Federal. Our account is going with him." Beckett's mouth opened, stayed open. "Mr. Holden." Something new was in his voice now, a crack in the finish, the sound of a man who is beginning to understand the actual size of what he's done. "If we brought Roy back, full reinstatement, a promotion, whatever compensation he requires." August turned and looked at me, one eyebrow slightly elevated. I smiled. "I'm very happy where I am." August turned back. "There's your answer, son." He moved toward the door. He stopped once, hand on the frame of the revolving door, and looked back across the marble lobby. "I've been doing business in this state for 50 years. Experience doesn't become obsolete just because something faster comes along. The land doesn't care about your software. And the people who work it. What they care about is whether you keep your word." He pushed through the door and walked out into the October morning, without looking back. I followed, leaving 23 years behind me, in a building that had already stopped being what I'd known it as. In August's truck outside, he let out a long, slow breath. "That went about how I expected," he said. "You were hoping for slightly more visible suffering," I said. He laughed, a real one from deep in the chest, maybe just a touch. The aftermath moved quickly once the numbers started talking. By end of business that day, Nova Trust's regional leadership was in emergency calls with their legal team. By Wednesday morning, the story had made its way through Lincoln banking circles, which in Nebraska means 3 phone calls and a Tuesday morning coffee, and 3 other agricultural clients placed their accounts under formal review. 2 of them were watching to see what happened with Holden as a signal. One of them had simply been looking for a reason. By Friday, Nova Trust had released a statement about leadership transitions in the Lincoln market. Beckett Morrison was moving to focus on strategic initiatives at the corporate level, which in corporate translation means his father was furious, and he was being removed from any position where he could do this kind of damage again. The refinancing closed 4 months later. Better terms than Nova Trust had offered. Clean structure, no complications. When August and I shook hands at the closing table, he said his grandchildren were already talking about what they were going to do with the first year of clear books. One of them wants to install irrigation on the south parcel. Another is looking at acquiring an adjacent property that's been coming up for sale for years. The third one just wants to make sure the old equipment barn gets a new roof before winter. The things that matter to a family aren't always visible in the financials. That's the whole point. That's what those 12 journals were for. I'm on my 13th now. This one has a red strap. Gwen found them at a stationery shop on O Street and brought me a box as a welcome gift when she followed me to Heartland Federal 3 weeks after everything fell apart. She said she wasn't interested in spending the rest of her career teaching a new VP how to talk to farmers. I gave her a raise. My office here overlooks the Haymarket district. On clear days, you can see the Capitol Dome. Behind my desk, 12 brown journals and 1 red one, lined up on the same kind of plain wooden shelf. The phone has direct lines to families across 5 counties who have trusted me with things that don't exist in any system. The stories behind the land, the promises between generations, the handshakes older than any contract in their files. Last week, I got a voicemail from Norm. He finally retired, full pension, taking his grandkids to the Sandhills for a fishing trip. He sounded like a man who'd been set free. As for Beckett Morrison, I heard he landed at a fintech startup in Austin, building something that disrupts traditional banking, apparently. I don't doubt his ambition. I don't even doubt his intelligence. I just hope that somewhere between the pitch decks and the launch parties, someone eventually says to him what Gil Hadley said to me. On my first day at First Cornerstone, 31 years old, and thinking I already knew something about the way money worked. The numbers are the easy part. Go learn what the numbers don't say.